my most terrifying experiences for the first time in 20 years. It's kind of the truth, because I talk a lot, and I talk a lot about my experiences, but there's some experiences I don't talk about. Partially, some of them are...
I got Periscope to work.
Mine's here.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're recording.
Do you want to do it?
Well, I was going to be an awkward Periscope. Okay, where was I? Yes. Some places, or some of my experiences I sometimes don't talk about. And there's several reasons. Some, there's just no opportunity. It doesn't fit. Because usually I'm talking about Hamilton. And I know we're in Hamilton, and I'm going to talk about Hamilton, but I'm also going to tell you about some of the places I've been, because I've spent the past 20 years traveling Canada and US's most haunted places. And I'll go through some of them with you, but the ones that stand out in my mind are Amityville and the Lizzie Borden house. I spent the night at the Lizzie Borden house. So I'll talk about those in a second because they were terrifying. But the reason why I'm also here in this whole 20 years revealing thing is because I want to talk about there's been some transformation that's happened for me personally in my life, and I don't know if you've been following Haunted Hamilton. How many of you guys are newbie Haunted Hamilton fans, or never even heard about Haunted Hamilton? Really, eh? Okay, cool. So this is awesome. We have some new followers now, hopefully, unless I suck. So how many are Haunted Hamilton veterans? How many have you guys heard about Haunted Hamilton? That's awesome, cool. So some of you may have seen the progression of spooky stuff, yeah? Some may, yeah. I used to be a bit larger. I actually lost 100 pounds. I had hot pink hair, blonde and hot pink hair. I was known for my crazy leggings walking around downtown Hamilton. But I've done a big transformation, and that, I don't know, but somehow it's been exactly 17 years running Haunted Hamilton, and running this business has allowed me to understand how things work a lot better in this world. At the beginning, I used to tell stories based on what I've heard, legends, folklore, research. That was probably about the first 15 years, and then the past 2 years since I met that guy who's wearing the Haunted Hamilton shirt, things have changed. I've become happier, and when you become happier, I know I sound like a flake, and this is going to totally sound like, yeah, come on, man, some kind of motivation thing here, but it's true, because somehow that changed, and when that changed, my paranormal world changed, because all of a sudden, and this is a crowd, and I'm always debating on whether or not I should vocalize this, but something's opened up psychically, and delving into this paranormal world, I think naturally it's going to happen. If you guys spend a good amount of time researching, watching even a spooky movie, you're just triggering subconsciously, and maybe you're allowing ghosts around you to start appearing. I don't know, these are all just ideas I'm starting to discover. But the one thing I have discovered, and what I'm going to kind of follow a timeline here with my speech, is that when you lose that fear, that's when things start to happen. And I have a story that goes along with that, and I'm going to get kind of personal, obviously, with some of this stuff. But basically, when I first started Haunted Hamilton, I was 18 years old, just young. I moved to Toronto. I'm a Hamiltonian, born and raised, love Hamilton. But I moved to Toronto for a year to go to school for web design, which ended up coming in handy because all the web design, graphic design for Haunted Hamilton is done by me, so I don't have to outsource, and I save the money on that. But I went to school for that, and it's when I went to school, another cool thing, because I see some of you guys are around my same age, Degrassi High, remember that? Yeah? Remember Degrassi High, the ramp that Joey Jeremiah walked up every day? That's the ramp I walked up every day to go to school. They turned that school into Centennial College. It was the Bell Center for New Media. So that was pretty cool. I felt really neat doing that. But during that time, I was in Toronto living for a year, and I just ended up missing Hamilton so much. I ran out of money, and I couldn't afford living in Toronto as well, so I only lasted a year. I worked at Stelco for the summer and saved up, but the thing is, in Toronto is where something switched in regards to the investigation, and it's because we went garage sailing one day, and it was at a funeral home, a garage sale, which is odd enough. I guess that's kind of a good way to start this story. And I was just wandering around the parking lot, and I looked at the one table, and there was a Ouija board, and I saw it, and I'm a cheapskate, so I offered the guy 50 cents for it, and he accepted. So I took the Ouija board home in a small apartment in Toronto, and that night we dimmed the lights and lit candles, and just thought, this was before Haunted Hamilton. I didn't know what I was doing. And just let's see what happens. But the one thing I did know was to have a voice recorder. Now we have our cell phones and we have digital voice recorders now, but back then it was cassette tape recorders and micro cassette tape recorders, which I think are better for catching EVPs, which are ghost voices. I can talk about that later when I get to the ghost equipment. But basically, we had set that up right at the edge of the Ouija board. And there's rules when you use the Ouija board. You don't talk, you don't say anything if you're recording, because if there's a voice, how do you know if it's yours or a spirit's? So the only time you talk is when you're answering or you're asking the questions. So the first question was, is there a spirit here? And it was all silent in the room, but then the planchette moved slowly to yes. And, more communication happened after that. Whatever, you say goodbye, I always say goodbye. And then we listened to the digital tape recorder afterwards. And this was the very first time I ever heard a ghost voice captured on tape. I didn't even know that it was called DVP. I didn't know nothing about this. But sitting there in the dark, listening to it like this, and you hear kind of static fuzziness, and you hear me say, is there a spirit here? And then you hear the planchette, shh, and then you hear me say yes, because I always vocalize what the answers are on the board, so listening back later, you know what it spells out. And then right after I said yes, a voice right in the microphone, yes, like that. Like that. I was 18, scared shitless. I didn't know what to do. Oh my God, I caught a ghost voice. So the only society at the time, there was two. There was Burlington, but that wasn't really a society, that was just tours. And then there was the Toronto Ghosts and Haunting Society. And I sent this voice to them, just a small audio clip, and it blew them away, where they set us up with some television producer guy from Toronto who wanted to start a documentary with us, just because of this one EVP. Keep in mind, this was 1998 or 1999, I can't remember the year, when we met with this guy. And the paranormal in Canada was very different at the time. Like, look at all you guys here in the horror industry. Hold on, I'm getting a drink. Two things worked against my favor at the time. One was that the paranormal wasn't popular and it was more of a joke. And two, my age. I was 18, nobody was going to take me seriously, right? And that was a huge struggle for about 10 years running Haunted Hamilton, which is why this is so awesome. This is my dreams come true here. But anyway, so we met with this producer in some seedy bar in Toronto, and we had our little digital recorder, we played it for him. And he was blown away by it. And nothing ended up ever coming from that documentation thing or meeting him. But I guess he planted the seed for Haunted Hamilton, because we met with him and he's like, so you're from Hamilton, eh? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, have you ever heard of the Belier Mansion, or Bellevue as it's known? Does that ring a bell for any of you guys? Yeah? Just a couple people? How many have heard of it? Wow, okay, this is cool, because this is pretty much where Hamilton's ghost stories began. This is the birth of Haunted Hamilton. Are you guys familiar with Whitehorn? Yeah. It was the sister mansion to Whitehorn. Picture an exact replica of Whitehorn, but flipped. And what made this even more unique than Whitehorn was that it had a widow's walk on the top of it. And you know where Sam Lawrence Park is? Right at, if you're going up the Jolly, we'll do this, if you're going up the Jolly Cut, you go this way, whatever. Sam Lawrence Park's kind of here. At the very end of Sam Lawrence Park is where this house stood, where Sam Lawrence Park kind of meets Belvedere Avenue. And Belvedere Avenue is named after this home. It was one of the very first homes on Hamilton Mountain, and the builder there put it there for a reason, because it overlooked the whole city, and it's such high-value property right now. And the home, this is the story he told us, and it seemed too good to be true. And for anybody to talk about this back then is still unusual. He said that this home had legendarily been haunted because apparently some time ago, about 50 years ago or something like that, a young kid was possessed by some spirit in the house, killed his family, and went up to the attic and then hung himself. That's already like kind of creepy enough. And then it's supposed to be, the legend states that 30 years later, another family moved in, and the husband had the same thing happen, where he became possessed, killed his family, and then went up in the attic and hung himself. So that was intriguing enough to be like, what? And between that and me missing Hamilton so much, and the third aspect, my schooling was pretty much done, it was time to move back to Hamilton, and I started digging deep into Belvedere. I went to special collections. I wanted to find out anything about this mansion. Little did I know it was right in the middle of a heated debate. It was 1999 where a man, and I'm not even going to hesitate to say his name, Claire Sellens, because he's done a very poor thing where he's allowed the property to sit there vacant, because what he did with this whole heated debate was he purchased the property. And when you purchase a historic property, there's rules you have to follow. And his stipulation was that he had to rebuild on the property within 2 years. The property's still sitting vacant there, it's just weeds growing and stuff. But what he did was go in the middle of the night, all shifty, and tore down the mansion, literally with some bulldozer, didn't have the right permits or anything, didn't tell anybody. The Historical Society of Hamilton wanted to go in and save some of the things. There was original crown moldings, but what was cool is there was a mirror. There was like mirrors on the ceiling, so much cool stuff, original fireplaces, wallpaper, things that would have been of such historic value, being one of the first homes on Hamilton Mountain. And he went and tore it all down and demolished it in the middle of the night. Everybody was there the next morning, walking on the rubble and the bricks, crying. There were people crying. I was lucky enough, a couple days before it was torn down, to get in. And it was pure daylight out, and I walked on the grounds of Belier Mansion, and I walked to the front, and the staircase was gone, so literally I had to be hoisted up and thrown up into the front door. And the other thing is, I had my dad's 35mm, really expensive 35mm camera in hand. They weren't home. I snuck into their house and I went to my dad's closet and I took out all of his fancy equipment because I knew this was going to be a cool opportunity. And I had this camera on me with a huge lens, and I got hoisted up into the mansion, and then I stood there at the front steps, and it literally felt like I was standing in an abandoned Whitehorn. Imagine if you were in Whitehorn, but everything was peeling, and everything was rotted. Everything's still there, but just like Silent Hill. That's what it felt like. And I explored, and I took a bunch of pictures, and these pictures ended up being the only last remaining photos ever taken on the inside of Belvedere Mansion before they demolished it. So that's pretty cool. And with these photos and my web design experience, I'm like, how can I get these photos out there, and how can I get all this controversy out there to show what's being done with Belvedere right now? I thought I could cause some uproar enough to maybe, make him not tear it down or whatever, but there wasn't enough time. Anyways, I created, there was like hauntedhamilton.homestead.com, and I had hauntedhamilton@geocities.com as my email address, or something like that, I forget what it was. And I just created a website to post these pictures. And all of a sudden, Brian Henley, longtime Hamilton Spectator columnist, he contacted me, and he heard about what I was doing with Belvedere. He's like, let's do a column on you. It happened to be on Halloween. He wanted to come and interview me, and I was having a Halloween party, so my place was all decked out, and I was in the middle of making bloody finger cookies, so my hands were all bloody. Like, it just looked awful. Like, hey, come and talk to me. But I did the interview. He covered it in Spectator, and that's when Haunted Hamilton, because people weren't talking about ghost stories until then. If you went to special collections on the 3rd floor, which is awesome. Did you see the Saturday's paper, which I was in, but also Margaret Houghton was in it. She's the long-standing historian here in Hamilton, and she just retired, but she's the one who really helped me at the beginning. There was one teensy folder with 2 papers, Hamilton Hauntings, and it was just hand-typed. It looked like it was from the 40s, and it had some notes about some hauntings in Hamilton, and that was it. That was the only documentation. And, there's the obvious, the Customs House, the Hermitage. That was enough for me to want to really delve into this, so I started making the website, blah, 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 all this, the columns, visiting, investigating, and it turned into a full-time thing for me. I was 18, I'm 37 now, and this is all I've been doing for my whole career. So, hold on, I need more water. Okay, I'm going to talk for 10 minutes about some of my most terrifying experiences. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A if you guys want to ask me anything paranormal or like Hamilton, anything you want, really. Cool? Mm-hmm. Are you guys terrified yet? No? Okay. How about I terrify you with a local gruesome story that's not ghostly, so I leave you with a little bit of Hamilton history that you might want to puke at. And then I will tell you about my Lizzie Borden and Amityville experiences. Yeah? That sounds good. Okay, so starting back with the story, the gruesome part and all of that, Hamilton isn't so pleasant. And if you guys know anything about your Canadian history, you might know about the War of 1812. They don't really document it in our books when we go to school. We learn about all this other stuff, but they don't talk about War of 1812. And if you actually learned about the War of 1812, it's way more brutal than you can imagine. And it happened right here on this property. Not this, possibly this property, but I mean Hamilton. And this area was actually kind of like the headquarters. There was Upper Canada. And you know where, if you're driving through Hamilton, York Road, and you're coming over the bridge, and you have the Hamilton Cemetery on your right, and you have Dundrum Castle on your left, right? I'm coming in from Burlington, kind of. That whole area was where Hamilton started. And I'm not going to say Hamilton, really, but Upper Canada at the time. That was our hub. And, you know, when you watch those movies or you go visit those cool forts, the wooden forts and the pioneers, all that kind of stuff, that's basically what was right there, where Hamilton Cemetery is. That was the military headquarters. And you know your whole War of 1812 story about Lord Secord and the Battle of Stony Creek. Basically, you know how the British marched. That's where they marched from. They were stationed where Hamilton Cemetery was. And then they got the tip off that the Americans were there, so they marched in the middle of the night over to Stony Creek. And that battle happened. But back at this headquarters, everything was there. It was like a trading post. All the military things were there, and so it was headquarters. And what had happened was, after the War of 1812 was done, you know how there's the cool crypts that are built into the dirt mounds? Those are actually there. They weren't built for the crypts. Those are original earthworks from the War of 1812, from the encampment there. So that's pretty cool in itself. Like, I wonder how much it costs to reserve one of those dirt mounds, a historic dirt mound. But that's original there too. So the Hamilton Cemetery was built as Canada's very first municipal cemetery on that property. And Resident Evil Part 2, I think, was filmed there, and lots of cool stuff in the Hamilton Cemetery. Lots of very prominent people buried there. Across the street, Dundrum Castle, the grounds, is where all this gruesome stuff happened. Now, like I said, the War of 1812 was ending, and if you were an American sympathizer, you were considered a high treasoner. And what they would do for punishment back then for treasoners was both a form of punishment, but also a form of, what's the word? When you want to show off to others not what to do?
Deterrent.
A deterrent? Yeah, good word. As a deterrent. So basically what happened was there was trials that were held. And these trials were held at the second floor of the Coach and Lantern in Ancaster on Wilson Street. You know that? In that restaurant? So that's connected. The attic up there, they held the trials. And during these trials, they convicted 11 men of high treason. And of these 11 men, 8 of them were convicted. And those 8 men were held as prisoners. They carted them over to the Ancaster Old Mill, which wasn't a restaurant at the time, it was just a mill. And they put them in the basement there. So if you ever hear about hauntings in Ancaster Old Mill, that could be why, because the prisoners were held there in the basement. And what they meant next could be another reason why their ghosts are still haunting, is because they took them by cart, these 8 men, to the grounds where I just explained to you of Dundrum Castle. In between where Dundrum Castle and the Admiral Inn are in, that stretch right there. And it was a big day for Hamilton. At the time, there was no TVs, no radios. There was only forms of entertainment, which would be execution. And Hamilton executions were huge at the time, so much so, Jackson Street used to be called Tyburn Street. In England, Tyburn Street is the street where all the executions happened on. They changed it to Jackson Street because they probably don't want to creep people out here in Hamilton. Cool fact. So anyways, executions were huge in Hamilton, and this one was probably the biggest at the time. And I don't even know if historically this has ever been done before. I'm just saying that because it's so baffling. What they did was they wanted to be so cool and make this the biggest spectacle for all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of people that had come to watch this. And what they wanted to do was build a gallows, not for one person, but for all 8, to hang them all at the exact same time. So how they decided to do this was this. Are you guys intrigued yet? If you have a weak stomach and you don't like gory stuff, you might want to do this because it's going to start to get gross. But keep in mind, this is what actually happened. Think Braveheart in your mind. The very last scene of Braveheart, how he met his ending, same style, drawn and quartering. That's what I'm going to describe. So on those grounds of Dundrum Castle, they built one big wooden gallows. And they had spent all night, or all day before building it, a bunch of men. And they had 8 nooses hung up. And what they had done was 2 carts pulled up, 4 men in each, and they were brought to their nooses. And they were attached to the nooses, And then the whole crowd was there, so much so that little boys would stand in line overnight and then like charge people. You want my spot? They would try. It was just crazy. People would bring blankets, picnics. They'd love this stuff and they would be cheering at it. So they were cheering at this moment. So what happened was the nooses went around their neck, and the sentence officiated at the Coach and Lantern was this: you shall be hung, but not until you are dead. Before you die, you will be cut down. So here's what happened. They basically took whips to the horses that were holding these carriages. Whoosh, whoosh, the carts went, the men fell, and they started choking and dangling, but they weren't allowed to die. So they got cut down quickly, and their bodies fell to the ground. And then they were carried, probably almost unconscious, but still alive. They were carried over to a slab table. Here's where it gets Braveheartish. In front of everybody, one by one. The next part of the sentence came through. Your insides will be cut basically from up here down to your navel, and all your bowels will be pulled out in front of you, held up in front of the crowd and in front of you. Go like this if you don't like this. Lit on fire, and that will be the last sight you see before you die. So that's what they did in front of the crowd, cheering, little kids cheering. And that wasn't done. That wasn't sufficient because you were tried for high treason. So what happened next was the drawn and quartering part. Once you were dead, they took each one of your limbs and they attached it to ropes. And then they attached those ropes to horses, 4 horses each person. They must have had a lot of horses. And then whoosh, and those horses went off in all directions and all the limbs ripped off. Gross, eh? There's the quartering part. Still wasn't done. And this was all in front of the people, keep in mind. The next part was a beheading. I don't know if this was done in front of the crowd or not. I'm not historically accurate on that. But the beheading was done so the head could be sent back over to England at the king's disposal so he could decide what to do with it. And more than often, he would send it all the way back over here on a boat, rotting, gross, yucky, to be put on a stake along the same road I just described to you, Hamilton Cemetery, Dundrum Castle. Stakes of heads along that, so you would be reminded never to be accused of high treason. So think of that next time you drive past Hamilton Cemetery in Dundrum Castle. Okay, creepy, eh? War of 1812, lots of creepy stories. Research it, it's cool. The next story I will tell you is my night at the Lizzie Borden house. Cool? Has anybody stayed there before? No? It's in Fall River, Massachusetts, and basically it was an old mill town, mining town. And if you know the story, Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her, I forget who comes first. They have it very inaccurate. Gave her mother 40 whacks. When she was done, she gave...
The filthy job was done, gave her father 21.
Yeah, see, so it's a little different, right? Oh, I love your shirt, Repo.
Yeah.
Genetic Opera, I'm friends with Darren Bousman, the director. He's the guy who did the Saw movies.
Yeah.
He once sent me a bunch of autographed Saw DVDs for my costume ball as prizes. That's why I love your shirt, cool. So getting back to the Lizzie Borden house. Basically, if you don't know the story, she was America's most notorious female serial killer. Possibly, and it was never proved that she actually killed her parents. She was acquitted and ended up living a nice life as an old maid with her cats. She moved just to a neighborhood right down the street, actually, and continued living amongst the community. But what had happened was, one hot, sweaty morning, she went and upstairs, and I stood on this spot. If you've seen the picture, have you seen the picture of Abby Borden, her stepmother, lying on the ground by the bed? It's just like that when you go to Lizzie Borden house. Not everything is historically accurate in there in regards to the furniture, but they've recreated it or went antiquing to find the exact replicas. If not, so the bedroom looks exactly like it does in real life, or had it looked in real life in that time. So basically, the tour guide's like, here, hold this hatchet. I'm like, okay. And then she's like, stand right here. And she put me right on the spot. And she's like, spread your legs a little bit. I'm like, okay. And then she's like, basically, imagine right now you're straddling Abby Borden's body with that axe. You just killed her. I was standing on the exact spot where Lizzie Borden, because I believe it was Lizzie, killed Abby Borden. How crazy is that? And then they take us downstairs. And then they told this other guy that was on the tour, all right, lie on this couch. And if you've seen that photo, the black couch with the father, Andrew Borden, with his head all kind of blown up. I have a picture on our museum if you want to go see it. I sat on that same couch. It's insane. So they give you this whole tour, and the tour was supposed to be probably about 2 hours because they show you the whole house. You go into the basement, you hear all the stories. This tour ended up being 4 hours because it was me on the tour. I couldn't stop asking questions and everything, and the lady loved it. She is on TV a lot. If you ever see any Lizzie Borden documentaries, I forget what her name is, but she's a cute lady with curly hair. She knows everything about it, so she told me some secrets. Anyway, so she knew that we were coming, representing Haunted Hamilton, and she wanted to put us in the most haunted room. And here's the thing, I'm not sleeping in Abby Borden's room, no way. And it didn't end up being Abby Borden's room that was the most haunted. It was Lizzie's parents' room at the back of the house. And when we were put in the room, it was a big room with a bed. I think it was his original bed too, I'm not sure, which would make sense why this happened next. And then right next door, in the same room, there was a big walk-in closet, and it used to be Abby Borden's walk-in closet. She had lots of jewelry and clothing, but they had changed it into, they put a small bed in there. It was like a closet. It just looked like a really grubby bed. It was just, you know, like, hey, if you have kids, put them in there, right? And anyways, and there's this luxurious bed over here. So first of all, falling asleep on the luxurious bed, exhausted, realizing, first of all, that the lady, the tour guide, was supposed to take the hatchet with her, because it wasn't an axe, by the way. It wasn't a whole axe she wielded. It was just a little hatchet. And she left the hatchet on our nightstand. I'm like, what? It's too late at night to do anything, so I opened up the drawer, put it in there, and close it. And then, you know, okay, let's go to sleep. Now, there's those old lamps. They're like Victorian style. They used to be operated by gas, but now they're plug-ins, but they're like a glass dome. I don't know, it's artistic with flowers sometimes painted on it. It was like that, right? And that was sitting on a heater right between the two windows. And all of a sudden, we were sleeping passed out, and I left this light on because I was scared crapless. Fearful, spooky stuff back then. And all of a sudden I fell asleep, and then I started having a nightmare. And this nightmare was from me standing at the entrance, looking at the bed, and literally what I had saw was total replica of Andrew Borden, her father, lying on the bed, sleeping like this, and then all of a sudden he just did this, and rose, and looked at me, like literally turned his head, and looked at me, but that was in a dream. I don't know if it was a dream, actually. I was so scared it woke me up, like, bah! One of those kind of things. And just as I woke up, bah! And did that, I looked over to the lamp, and that lamp slowly started dimming. And then the room went pitch dark. And afterwards, there was this other, they told me this after the fact. There's a table over here. There's a picture of Andrew Borden, and there's all this change around it, and maybe some $1 bills, I don't know. But I never thought to ask why that was there. I thought it was tip money for thanks for cleaning, and they just forgot to take it. And then she told me the next morning, oh, we forgot to tell you. As respect, you're supposed to leave change there before you sleep in the room so they won't bug you through the night. And I never left anything, so it was a terrifying night. The cool thing is, I got to talk to the owner, got to tour the house. Awesome, awesome experience. Super haunted. If you ever want, you can go there and spend the night. On that same trip, which wasn't so far, Long Island, New York, Amityville, the Amityville Horror House. Now, we all know the story, so I don't need to go through the story. But the cool part about the story is Lorraine and Ed Warren. You guys familiar with them?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. If you're not, you know the Conjuring movie? The Conjuring movies that came out? That's about them. Ed passed away. Lorraine is still alive and doing her thing, although her health is kind of deteriorating now, so her son-in-law Tony is traveling with her. I had the amazing opportunity to meet Lorraine Warren in person and sit down with her and talk with her, not only in person, but she was also on my radio show about 5 years ago. And she did one of her longest ever interviews in her history with me. It was about, I don't even remember how long, 20 minutes, but 20 minutes for Lorraine Warren on a radio interview was huge, when normally these should be about 2 to 5 minutes. And between these conversations, face-to-face with Lorraine Warren and on the radio, she told me what it was like to go into the Amityville house for the first time as the investigation team. Now, right after the murders happened, if you're not familiar, the story, basically, the Lutz family, Ronnie DeFeo, went through the whole home in the middle of the night with a shotgun and killed his entire family, all of his siblings, who were young, a lot younger than him, and his parents, all where they were sleeping. But the weird thing is, they all were found with their faces down. They were all found on different levels, and there was nothing found in their system, so they weren't drugged. So you would think after the first shot downstairs, why weren't the others tipped off after the first shot, right? Something strange about that. Why were they all found face down? The last shot was up in the attic for little Jody. She was the last one to be killed. The little girl, if you remember the movie, she's the remake, they make her like the main ghost. She was the last one to be killed up there. But right before, she's the only one who I think heard it, because when Ronnie DeFeo came in, she looked at him and said, "Ronnie, what are you doing?" And then he shot her. And she was the last to die. But basically also, the only indication that something had gone wrong was the neighbor's dog. It had started barking, and that's what tipped off the neighbors, because the dog started going crazy, and then they found out what was going on. And then when they walked in, they found the gruesome discovery. If you do a little research, the movies don't talk about this. The remake with Ryan Reynolds does, but I think most people don't take that movie as seriously. But the historical research is there in it, and if you've seen it, they talk about that Ketchum guy, catch him and kill him. I've done my research. Now, the property actually was native ground. So is it native stuff is there a curse? I think it actually is legit. Ronnie DeFeo, I don't know. But here's where I'll kind of end my story. I was talking, because see, I said I talk too much. I'm okay on time. The thing with Lorraine Warren was she told me that when they first went into Amityville, she walked in there and she could see the spirits there. And she said one weird thing that stood out that I guess would make sense at the time, I don't know, but she said she walked in and she looked over and she looked at the kitchen table and she saw some of the bodies laid out under a white sheet. So I'm starting to think, because I know when, going back to Lizzie Borden, when the police had found their bodies, they took their bodies and put them on the kitchen table, the same table that they ate breakfast at the very next morning. That's how Lizzie was. She continued to make breakfast on that same... But anyways, that's what they would kind of do back then. They would perform autopsies right there in the moment on the tables in the home. So I'm wondering, not that that's that, but maybe the bodies were somehow put on the table. I don't know why Lorraine saw them on the table. But she continued to tell me about how it was to walk through the house. And she told me about this little boy that she saw up on the second floor. And it ends up being one of the most famous ghost photos ever captured. If you've ever watched any documentary on Amityville, you see the little boy peeking on the second floor through the bedroom hallway. That's the boy she talked to me about. So it was really cool to talk with her. She's been my idol for a long time. I guess I'm following in her footsteps, but in a spookier way. But the follow-up to my Amityville story, and I think it's probably where my psychic stuff started budding, because it was my first psychic test ever. And what I did was we traced down the cemetery where the whole DeFeo family was buried. And I had just watched a TV show a week before we went there on Amityville, and there was this psychic lady who had went to the same grave or whatever, and she left a penny on it. Now, I knew I wanted to go to the cemetery. It was getting late in the day. We still hadn't checked into the hotel, which was still a long drive, but I was determined. So we got to the cemetery, and we parked in the parking lot, and I'm like, I said the bad word. And basically I said it because when you look at the graves, they were all facing the opposite way. There was no writing on this side. So I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to find this grave and all of this? There's no indication. I had no clue. Huge cemetery, no names from that direction. So I'm like, all right, let's do a test here. And I closed my eyes and I said, all right, bring it. I'm like, where's the DeFeo grave? If somebody here is divining, guiding me on this, show me where the DeFeo grave is. And I just, okay. And I started walking. It literally didn't even take me 30 seconds. I just beamed right to this grave. I turned around and it said DeFeo. I swear to God that happened. And I looked down and I saw the penny sitting there too on the grave, so I knew it was from that filming. But it was the grave of all of the kids and the parents of the DeFeo family, and I stood right on there too. So when you bring yourself that close to history, you can't help but get closer to the paranormal. And what I was saying at the beginning, spooky stuff being a chicken, and now I'm not, it takes being happy and maybe having an ultimate fear, an ultimate scare, to lose that fear, to start having things happen. And so I guess that's where I'll end it there. So when you go into places, don't be scared, don't be naive, and also the biggest thing is be respectful, because we did a seance last night at Hamilton Place. I had booked out all of Hamilton Place. We went into the underground tunnels that our legendary talked about, and we investigated. And basically we did a seance after. And if you all have the right intentions, things can happen. And we had all the equipment, and it started going off, and you can have real communication. But if there's one person there that might treat it as a joke, that can really throw the energy off. And I talked about, did you see the breakfast television thing I did? No? Yay. Go to hauntedhamilton.com. I posted it right there on the homepage. I was on breakfast television on City TV, right, Justin? Yeah. On Tuesday morning, and I talked about ghosts and stuff, and I blew Frankie Flowers away. But, yeah, it was pretty cool, actually. But where was I going with that? What did I say? The fear part. And, yeah, truly losing that fear totally eliminates any possibility of there being fear for the paranormal. And also, don't be influenced by the media, because I'm trying to give you tips here. Horror movies are kind of the worst thing to watch before you're going to go on an investigation, because, as our team knows, you could sit there all night and nothing will happen. It's the most boringest thing ever. So the more time and effort you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And Hamilton has lots of places. Hamilton's more historic than Toronto, which means we have more ghosts. And if you want to know about those ghosts, you can come join me. I do downtown Hamilton walks, and I talk just as much if you want to keep up. But I point out all these cool little tidbits. The stuff you don't hear in school, the stuff you don't hear in history books. I tell you all the nitty-gritty underground dark secrets of Hamilton. And I walk in an alleyway where Jack the Ripper walked, 100%. And I take you there too. So if you want to hear about all that, just go to hauntedhamilton.com. Cool? Cool. Water. So now we can do some questions for, I think, 5-10 minutes, if you have any, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hi, Steph.
Hey, you.
You guys did a trip down to where they filmed The Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go? Did you have any things happen?
I'm glad you asked, because I was told to tell this story today. It ties in nicely with my whole fear thing, because I've been to Mansfield Reformatory about 10 times now, and if you're not familiar with where that is, that's in Ohio.